What's up, guys? So this is going to be a Master Duel tier list. Now, what's really interesting about Master Duel is that we have a slightly different format to the TCG and to the OCG. It's quite similar to a format that I know that Japan did a while ago, where it's a best of one format, and the ban list is more of an OCG ban list than a TCG ban list. However, there are one or two minor changes to account for newer cards. There are also some TCG exclusive archetypes that are missing from Master Duel, namely B-Trooper. B-Trooper is not in the game, unfortunately, which is a shame because that deck has been doing bits in the YCS. But yeah, so the way this is going to work is tier 1 is decks that are either very cheap while still being very effective, allowing you therefore to buy loads of effective staples to go with the deck. Tier 2 is going to be decks that are slightly less effective, or they're a little bit too expensive to justify being in tier 1 next to some of the other more efficient strategies to do. Tier 3 is going to be decks that are either ridiculously expensive and not really worth the cost, or they're just not as strong. They occasionally have to rely on their side deck, easy strategies to get around, and not worth trying is going to be, just don't bother with these decks unless you're planning to just waste money on the game. But to start off with the first one, and this is probably one of the saddest, but Altergeist. Altergeist is definitely the not worth trying, and it's really just down to the fact that they only have multi-faker at 1, which really makes it just not an effective trap strategy to play. For some reason, they have multi-faker at 1, don't have access to Mystic Mine, and then they just really can't deal with a lot of the oppressive degenerate cards that come out. If you want to play a trap strategy, there are way better trap strategies to play than Altergeist. Next up, Sky Striker. And Sky Striker I'm going to put at the top of tier 2. Now, I don't necessarily think it's the best deck. In fact, no, I'm going to put it at the bottom of tier 1. I'm going to put Sky Striker at the bottom of tier 1. So I did recently just get to Platinum on a Master Duel, even though I said that I wouldn't play that much. I ended up playing a lot more. And one thing I would say is that the presence of Sky Striker and Platinum is heavy enough that I think I can reward it. And this is even without DPE. And now, this isn't because Sky Striker is some incredible, insanely powerful deck. But this is more to do with the fact that Sky Striker does really well into the Eldlich matchup. They also do really well with a lot of just generically good staples like Maxi that other decks can't really play through as well. And so the combination of these factors mean that when you do get to kind of that platinum tier level, Sky Striker is definitely going to do you a good job. So it isn't necessarily going to give you a ton of free wins in the lower tiers. However, in the higher tiers of platinum, Sky Striker is definitely a good choice. On top of that, it's not super expensive. Yes, you do have a few ultra rares in the deck, but again, the prevalence of having so many extra slots in Sky Striker does mean that you can play a lot of cheaper staples if you do need to. Salamangreat, unfortunately, is going to be tier 3. Salamangreat isn't actually too expensive. There's only a few ultra rare cards in the archetype. However, unfortunately, it's a similar kind of situation to Altergeist, where what's the point of playing Salamangreat? There are much more effective kind of turn skipping strategies. Now, they do have a lot of their cards, which is great, but even that, I think they have quite a few cards at 2 if I'm not mistaken. I can probably bring it up on the Master Duel screen just to compare. So let's go to Salamangreat. So they have all of their cards at 3, which is really nice, apart from Gazelle, which is at 1. However, even with that, they're just better strategies to play. They're strategies that will do more of a job for you in the long term, in my opinion, than Salamangreat. So that's why I wouldn't really pick Salamangreat left to me anyway. I wouldn't pick Salamangreat. I rely on a different deck. But then moving on, we then have, so actually I'm going to move Thunderbeast to the bottom. That's another TCG exclusive archetype that unfortunately, or I don't think it's TCG exclusive, but it's not available in Master Duel at the moment. But no, moving on, we have Drytron, and Drytron's going to be top of tier 2. Very good deck. It's basically an FTK. Now, the disadvantage with Drytron is that it's one of those decks that Maxi, it has to take the Maxi challenge, and so that does weaken it in the higher tiers. It also loses pretty hard to Eldlich. Drytron's always had a historically weak Eldlich matchup simply because of Solemn Strike. It doesn't matter how many negates your Herald has. If I'm going to simply Torrential Strike your board, your Herald can't do anything, and they don't even have DPs to trade effectively with back row decks. So when you get to the higher tiers, Drytron is not going to do as good job. In the lower tiers, it is going to snowball very effectively, though. It is going to just demolish a lot of decks, just because even if they have Maxi, sometimes it's not going to matter if they're not playing a deck as good as you, and if they don't have Maxi, well, good luck playing through Herald with 4 negates or whatever. And they also have Union Carrier, which is going to be very irritating to deal with. Virtual World is next. Virtual World, best deck in the format in my opinion. Virtual World just has VFD. It can play through pretty much any Maxi kind of challenge, simply because unless you specifically open and specifically draw into kind of like Imperm plus Chalice or something, you're not going to be able to play through that VFD. They can make Zeus super easily, really. They can make Zeus really easily going second as well. And so, just all in all, Virtual, in my opinion, is the strongest deck. It's going to dominate at the lower tiers. At the higher tiers, Shen Chuche is still a very effective strategy. I would almost recommend when you get into kind of high platinum tier to almost take out Maxi and rely more on kind of just the standard kind of Chuche plays, just because you are going to be seeing a lot of strike in Eldritch. I can confirm, like, as soon as I got into platinum, it felt like those were the only 2 decks I was seeing. So yeah, Virtual definitely is going to be solid tier 1. Ignister is also going to be tier 1 for a similar reason. People don't main deck Kaijus, and so how the heck are they dealing with the Arrival Cybers at Ignister? It's just such a strong card. If you bring that out on the board turn 1, and it's so easy to bring out, especially when you have 3 cross out in this as well, so you can just dodge all of the different hand traps. 3 cross out, 2 called by, you're going to get to your Arrival. And if they don't play a Kaiju, it's just a ticking time bomb, because every turn it's going to gain you advantage, which is really, really nice. It is also probably the cheapest tier 1 deck to play. Literally all of the Ignister cards, I'm just going to bring it up again for myself so that I can kind of tell you guys, but yeah, pretty much all of the Ignister main deck cards, not pretty much, all of the Ignister main deck monsters are going to be rare or lower. Most of the spells are rare or low, there are only 2 secret rares, and then in the extra deck it's mostly secret rares with... They've got 3, technically they've got 3 ultra rares, however one of the ultra rares, which is like Dragon Knight Ignister, you don't actually need to play. In fact, a lot of competitive lists right at the moment simply take it out so they have an extra slot. So yeah, all in all, it just makes it a very, very effective and consistent strategy to take into Master Duel. I think it's great. Shaddoll, unfortunately, is going to be bottom of tier 3. Shaddoll is not a bad strategy, however, it is ridiculously expensive. Oh my gosh. Shaddoll has pretty much just all ultra rares and secret rares, which is really, really frustrating, and it also relies on a lot of really good cards from other archetypes. So this is kind of Invoke, Shaddoll, Dogmatica good stuff, this whole kind of deck as a whole. And the problem with this is that you have to rely on the ultra rares from the Invoked archetype, then the Shaddoll archetype, then the Dogmatica archetype, and as a result you end up with this just really, really expensive deck that isn't even necessarily amazing. It's not going to guarantee you wins against a lot of the decks in the format, unfortunately. So yeah, Shaddoll's is another tier 3. Madolche's I'm actually going to put at the bottom of tier 2. So Madolche's does have an advantage. They are relatively cheap to build, I would say. The good thing about Madolche is essentially they can out most boards. So unlike a lot of the other decks on this, beyond Arrival Cybers at Ignister, they can pretty much out any other board as long as they kind of get the purchase to do that. So you can kind of go second Saki with Dark Ruler cards and stuff like that. And by the way, this is the thing about Master Duel, guys, it's a best of 1 format. So if you're going first, you don't want to let your opponent play, and if you're going second, you want to sack the heck out of your opponent with cards like Evenly, Dark Ruler and Kaijus in your main deck. Playing cards like these will absolutely dominate your opponent because no one is expecting it. Again, it's a best of 1 format. So yeah, that's what gives Madolche the edge, I would say. Blind second Madolche, not going first. Don't go first with Madolche, you're going to just lose in Master Duel. But if you do blind second Madolche, I think you're going to do quite well in Master Duel, and it's also not too expensive to build. Dragon Link, unfortunately, I'm going to put this again bottom of tier 3, and again, a lot of these kind of good stuff decks rely on too many expensive ultras. So if I go to just Rockets alone, if you look at Rockets has quite a few secret rares that you're going to have to build, and then you just have to build other kind of generic ultra rares as well because it's dragons. So you have things like Red Eyes, Darkness, Metal Dragon and stuff that you might want to play in the deck, or your Striker Dragon or whatever. And so that as a whole just makes it not as effective to play. It's also just generally been weaker in the format, to be honest. Yeah, that's been the thing about Rockets for a while now. If I actually look... Yeah, in terms of statistics as well, it's not really topping as much as we would hope it would top. So yeah, I'd definitely say Dragon Link is going to be low tier 3. Don't really go for it. Moving on, Dinos. Dinos I'm actually going to put, again, relatively middle to high of tier 2. Dinos is very cheap. That's probably the biggest strength of it. It's very cheap. You only really need 1 Tyranno. You can run 2, but you can get away with running 1. But again, this is another strategy that can blind second and absolutely crush decks. It's a deck that can main deck and search out its Kaiju, which is also really, really nice. And so the combination of these factors gives you a deck that, again, going second, you can absolutely sack people and destroy them. So yeah, I do think Dinos is a great strategy to pick up. Another nice thing, and I said this in my top 5 video, if you're looking to play Master Duel long term, chances are they are going to adjust some of the things in the game. This might not necessarily be the same ban list forever, and so this is a good deck to pick up in the long term, because Dinos always tends to have an ability to do well in pretty much any format, just because of the way the deck's designed. Tyranno is going to be one of the best boss monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh! And so yeah, just all in all, a very, very good strategy. Another really nice thing about Dinos compared to us is they have Misket 3. They have Overwrapped 2, they have Misket 3. So to be honest, I would rather have Misket 3 than have Overwrapped 2, than have Overwrapped. I would rather have Misket 3 than Overwrapped 3. So yeah. Dinos, great tier 2 strategy. Earth Machine, unfortunately, I just think it's tier 3. It dies to every hand trap, and it's not doing anything particularly oppressive, so I'd put it quite low as well. But let's move on to Mech Knight. Now, I'm just going to quickly check for Mech Knight, because I'm pretty sure they don't have anything other than Gear Suit at 1. But yeah, so Mech Knight, I'm actually going to put, again, low tier 3. Having Gear Suit at 1 is a bit of a disadvantage. If you're playing Invoked Mech Knight, you're playing Invoked, and like I said, it's just the issue of it being too expensive to be really worth it, in my opinion. But it is still a good deck. You might sack some wins, but this is the other disadvantage as well. Again, it's not doing anything majorly degenerate going second. It's not making a huge Zeus most of the time. It can make a 4 material Zeus, but it's not always going to be doing that, and that's an expensive build anyway. And beyond that, what else are you doing? You're not making Dragoon or something like that in the deck either. So all of this together, in my opinion, just makes Mech Knight not really an effective strategy to go with. So yeah, as for that reason, I'm definitely going to put Mech Knights in tier 3. Now, Subterror, I can't remember the cost for Subterror, but yeah, I'm just looking at it now. Subterror, I think, is actually going to be a mid tier 2. So I'll put it at kind of the bottom of tier 2. But yeah, very solid strategy. And the thing about Subterror is while it is a little bit expensive, because you have obviously got your Guru and your Hidden Seat, your Ultras and Secret Res, the advantage of Subterror is set 5 pass strategies are always going to be very, very effective in a best of 1 format. You just set a bunch of cards. If your opponent doesn't natively have back row removal, you're just going to outgrind them and beat them turn 1. Fiendus, by the way, is not a rare at all. It's just a normal card, so that's even better. Very, very cheap to build in terms of that side of the deck. The expensive part of the deck is going to be the stables and stuff, but the good thing about that is the traps and stuff that you build for a deck, that you buy for a deck like Subterror, can be used in another deck, so you're not buying a bunch of stables that can only be used for one deck. Burning Abyss, however, is going to be high tier 2, so this is a super, super cheap deck. And then they just have a bunch of really good cards naturally. There's also a lot of different ways you can build it, so you can kind of build Burning Abyss in the kind of standard combo way with Phantom Knights. Then instead, if you don't want to do that, you can build them more Trap BA, and I'd say both variants tend to be very, very good. So there's just a huge amount of versatility. The cards can be used in loads of different ways. It does good, again, in the higher tiers, better in the higher tiers than the lower tiers. In the lower tiers, PK is good, but not amazing. In the higher tiers, PK isn't necessarily as good. However, Trap BA starts to become a lot stronger in the higher tiers again, because I said there's a lot of Striker, a lot of Eldlich, a lot of just control, basically, is what you're going to be facing in Platinum. And so as a result, I definitely would say BAs is going to be a good tier 2 deck. Cyber Dragons is also going to be a very good tier 2 deck. Guys, look, Cyber Dragons, I'm not putting in the bottom tier for once. And it really just comes down to, yeah, being able to contact fuse is always going to be very, very good. That lets you out things like the Ignister monster, which is amazing. And then on top of having that advantage, Cyber Dragons is just good at going second most of the time. They've historically always been a good deck at OTKing and cracking through boards, and it is no different in Master Duel. Now, Cyber Dragons is a little bit expensive, and a slight disadvantage of Cyber Dragons is obviously going to be that it does rely on a lot of kind of unique and relatively expensive staples like Machine Dupe and things like that. However, ignoring that, I still think it is a relatively good strategy. You can get away with playing Cyber Dragons and see pretty good results. So moving on to Infernoble. So Infernoble, if we look at it, Infernoble is a relatively expensive strategy because it's going to rely on a lot of kind of the crazy warrior cards and things like that, which is a bit frustrating. However, I'm going to still put it in bottom of tier 3 because yeah, so it's expensive, and then even adding on to the fact that it's expensive, they're just better combo decks to play. It also can't really play effectively through Max C. This is a deck that special summons an absolutely stupid amount of times. And so as a result, I mean, you can't even hand loop someone with this if they've got Max C, because they'll Max C you and they'll draw more than you'll hand loop them for. So yeah, unfortunately, Infernobles, I'm going to put it in tier 3, just because I think there are better combo decks if you want to do that. Moving on next, Tri-Brigade variants. Tri-Brigade variants is also going to be high tier. I think I'm going to put above Ignister. It's definitely better than Ignister. And it really just comes down to Tri-Brigade plays so well into Maxi, and Tri-Brigade just plays so well in a control format as well. They top deck insanely. Any Tri-Brigade monster is going to be a Link 4 in the grind game and banish a card off the field for free. If you're playing the Appaloosa Revolt version, great, you've got Appaloosa Revolt. If you're playing Tri-Brigade Lyrilusk, great, you've got an FTK. If you're playing Tri-Brigade 2, great, you've got Zeus on top of having kind of standard crazy Tri-Brigade plays. I mean, it's just a really, really good and effective deck. I definitely think Tri-Brigade is probably one of the best decks to build on Master Duel. There is a chance it could get hit on the ban list that's coming up in the TCG, and that ban list could get put into Master Duel. But even with that, I don't think the deck will be completely dead. And so yeah, Tri-Brigade, very good deck to do. And on the other advantage of it is that it's also quite cheap as well. The Tri-Brigade monsters are mostly quite cheap. The Shureg, I think, is quite expensive. And if I'm not mistaken, Ferrigit maybe, I think two of them. One of them is an Ultra, one of them is a Secret. They do have a little bit of expensive staples as well, but who the heck cares? Like I said, if you're buying generic expensive staples, I don't consider that a problem. So for that reason, Tri-Brigade is definitely going to be another tier 1 deck. Pendulums is another one that I'm going to put in tier 2. And this is what you're going to see, guys. There are going to be a lot of decks that historically are crap in the TCG, but in a best of 1 format, when your opponent can't side against you, and when you have certain cards back in the format, like our amazing card in Pendulum that we've wanted for ages, which is Electrum, right? We have it at 1. Amazing. When you have a card like that in Master Duel, it just gives you such a huge advantage. Now, Pendulum can actually make insane boards, especially the Endymion variant. And when you have the Endymion variant that can put up a negate before it even really goes into anything, just with Servant, the deck can do amazing bits. So Pendulum Magicians or Pendulum Endymions, both of them are going to be great tier 2 decks. Now, in terms of cost, they are relatively expensive. However, Pendulums, again, is going to be a deck where, even though it's expensive, I still think it's worth investing in, just because Electromite is unlikely to change if you're going to be playing the OCG version of Master Duel, because I do think they are going to have both the OCG and TCG lists. And also, just because even as you've invested in the Pendulum deck, we know Beyond the Pendulum is going to eventually come to the game. And when that card does come to the game, Pendulum does have a chance to see itself back in the meta. So yeah, Pendulum, definitely a very good tier 2 deck. Sword Soul, unfortunately, is not in the game. It would be lovely if Sword Soul was in the game, but not being in the game, we definitely can't put it there. We've already talked about kind of Shaddoll variants and stuff like that. We've already talked about Pendulum. Grandmargie is actually going to be bottom of tier 1 as well. Look, go second, banish a bunch of cards, sack your opponent. This strategy is the definition of cheese, and that's why I think Grandmargie definitely has to be a tier 1 strategy. It's just so good and so unfair. I mean, this is the thing, again, your opponent's not going to be expecting this. So if you kind of kaiju their board, desires, Gizmek, evenly, all of this kind of sacky cards, and then just ping your opponent for kind of 10,000 damage of Grandmargie, what the heck can they do? They can't side against that. Game 1, they're not going to be doing something like holding a Veil or holding a Chalice of the Grandmargie, because they don't know you're playing it. And so this is what makes Grandmargie so good. Another thing is most people are going to try and blind first place, because it's just, why not? You can sack your opponent, but Grandmargie doesn't care. If you use something like True King of All Calamities, literally does not affect Grandmargie. If you try and use Maxi, who cares? Normal summon Grandmargie. Everything about the deck just screams degenerate, and this is a really, really good strategy to be playing in Master Duel. Mystic Mine, unfortunately, not worth trying, obviously. Mystic Mine burn strategies in general, even though it's the card is Mystic Mine, I would say they're not worth trying in Master Duel. Firstly, a lot of the cards are just obscure and hard to get, and they're in packs that you don't want to be looking at in the first place. And secondly, Mystic Mine is banned. Really weird, by the way. I'm surprised that Mystic Mine is just not in the game. It's weird to play in a game with no Mystic Mine. I'm probably slightly different. Maybe I know. You guys tell me in the comments, but I would much rather have Maxi than Mystic Mine. I'm over Mystic Mine. I don't like that card at all. And yeah, I think it'd probably be a lot better. But yeah, anyway, moving on. Adamancipator, unfortunately, is going to be not worth trying as well. And again, it just comes down to being a really expensive combo deck. It can do degenerate things going first, but there's always a better combo deck to build. And you just need to pay for so many unnecessarily expensive cards. Yeah, it's like one of the Adamancipator normal summons that you have to play through of is going to be a secret rare. Your Adamancipator Synchros are going to be a bunch of secret rares and ultra rares. Your Adamancipator Reborn is also a secret rare. I mean, it's just a really, really unnecessarily expensive deck. And for that reason, it just makes it, in my opinion, I mean, it's just not worth building, because it's not going to be doing the job that you need it to do. So yeah, definitely going to be not worth trying. At most, you could maybe argue tier 3, but I wouldn't even touch it, just for the reason that there's always going to be a much better option than Adamancipator. Live Twins is going to be a good tier 2 deck, so I'm going to put it tier 2, top tier 2. And this is the thing, Live Twins, even though it is quite expensive, is a good strategy already. And one of the great things about Live Twins is that it's similar to Sky Striker in that it can fit a huge amount of staples, and it also has a relatively simple combo line. They don't have to special summon a bunch of times. They can almost just rely on the staples in their hand, or they can summon twice and then on your turn do some more summoning. So that's what's really good about Live Twins. I do think it's a great strategy. I also think that it's nice because it does kind of play well into that Striker matchup. It plays well into that Eldlich matchup. It plays well into that Tri-Brigade matchup. It's good at kind of trading and playing that resource game 1-for-1. Its resource game isn't necessarily as busted as Flunderies in the TCG, but it's probably got one of the better resource games of the control decks at the moment. Orcust. So, someone might get upset at me for saying this, but look, go second Orcust. So I have given it a bit of try on Master Duel, and I'll say go second Orcust is quite good. So actually, I'll put it bottom of tier 2. I don't know. I'm torn between bottom of tier 2 and tier 3, but I think I'll say bottom of tier 2. Go second Orcust is quite a good strategy, just because, again, if you're blinding second with Kaijus and things like that, it's quite hard for your opponent to deal with. You do have one Gearsu, but you have Heartback. Having Heartback in Orcust is an amazing thing, and it really just opens up new lines to play for the deck. Heart basically means that your Orcust 1-card starters actually do things, essentially. So a lot of the times before your Orcust 1-card starters, it's like you have to have another card to really do your full Orcust combo. Now Scrap just becomes actual full Orcust combo in terms of actually setting up your board and having the Galatea at the end instead of needing one more extender, which is really, really nice. So Harp does a lot for the deck. So yeah, Orcust is definitely going to be, I would say, bottom of tier 2, but this is mainly for going second strategy. If you're doing going first, however, I would say something like Orcust Eldlich might be a bit of a better decision, just because when you're going second, you can kind of get away with pure Orcust, but going first, Orcust isn't necessarily putting up an oppressive enough board, in my opinion, especially without something like Dragoon or something like DPE. Then Prank-Kids. So I have to look at Prank-Kids to look at cost, but I have a sneaking suspicion it's cheap, and if it's cheap, then I think I know where it's going. Yeah, I'd say Prank-Kids is cheap enough that I'd say Prank-Kids is going to be probably, I'd say, top of... let's say top of tier 3. Top of tier 3. It's not necessarily as strong as the other strategies, I would say. However, it is still good enough that I would definitely say... In fact, you know what? No. I'm going to put it slightly higher in T2. Because, okay, this is again a strategy that, again, it's got a couple of relatively expensive cards, but it's cheap enough in terms of the main deck, because all the main deck Prank-Kids are normal. So even all of the cost is just the extra deck. So even though the extra deck has a lot of ultras and secrets, you're not paying anything for the main deck, which is really, really nice. And this is literally, none of the spells or traps are higher than normal rarity. And so as a result, I definitely think Prank-Kids is deserving of a spot in tier 2. It's a good strategy, it's quite consistent. Now, you do have a slight disadvantage in that this is a deck that absolutely gets stun-locked by Max C. It's going to get completely destroyed if you if your opponent has Max C. However, Prank-Kids is so consistent, especially having Meow at 3 in this list, by the way, that most of the time you can assume your opponent's not going to have Maxi. They only have Maxi 30% of the time, which means when your opponent doesn't draw Maxi, chances are you are going to be ahead, just because the deck is good at doing what it does. So yeah, Prank-Kids definitely, I think, is going to be a good tier 2 choice. Eldlich, this is another one that's going to be in tier 1. I think I'll put it just below Ignister, but above Sky Striker. And so this is another deck that when you get to the higher ranks, it's going to be amazing. And then the lower ranks as well, it's also amazing just because set 5 pass. Set 5 pass with Eldlich, skill drain at 3. I mean, what the heck does your opponent do against that? It's just such a good strategy at the moment. Another really nice thing about Eldlich is that it's not too expensive. You can use some cheap trap staples if you really need to. However, obviously, you do want the more expensive ultra rare traps like Ice Dragon's Prison. But yeah, Eldlich is definitely going to be a really, really good strategy to pick up. Then we're moving into Zoodiac. So Zoodiac, yep. Look, Zoo, I think, is a testament to just how strong it is when one monster goes into another one for free. This is why Link 1s are so strong, and Zoodiac was Link 1s before Link 1s came out. Every card is a 1-card XYZ, every card is a 1-card full combo. Zoodiac's just one of the best decks whenever Dryland's not banned. I mean, Konami really needs to hardcore hamstring this deck, to make it not a meta deck in whatever format it's in. It's also quite cheap as well, which is nice, but yeah, I mean, can you imagine? Zoodiac is one of the best decks in Master Duel, and they don't even have flipping Barrage. What? I mean, it's just insane. The deck is just so strong. Definitely a really good one to pick. Definitely a really good one to hold on if you intend to play the OCG format as well. So yeah, Zoodiac is going to be up there. So Dogmatica, like I say, Dogmatica variants and Invoke variants, they're just all going to be in tier 3, just too expensive to be worth it. Dragoon, unfortunately, is not in the game, and I'm just confused. I don't know why Dragoon's not in the game. I feel like Dragoon should be in the game. Maybe someone can explain it to me. But yeah. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm a moron. Now I figured out why Dragoon's not in the game. I'm pretty sure Dragoon is banned, if I'm not mistaken. That must be why. Because I was so confused. I was thinking, why wasn't I seeing Dragoon? But if I go to the forbidden list, okay, Dragoon's banned. That's why Dragoon's not in the game, guys. Thank you. You can laugh at me in the comments. But yeah, Dragoon, unfortunately, is not in the game. So that's why Dragoon is in the not worth trying section. Ice Shade is not out in Master Duel at the moment, as far as we're aware. Yeah, Ice Shade's not in Master Duel. Heroes, in my opinion, they're just not worth trying. Just too expensive. They've just got so many bloody cards. I don't know what build you want to do with Hero, but they're just too expensive. Just too many unnecessarily expensive cards. It's not a particularly amazing strategy without having Phoenix Enforcer. Just don't bother with heroes, in my opinion. There are better strategies to play if you want to play in Master Duel. Magic Key is another one that unfortunately is not there, so Magic Key definitely has to be kind of in our non-existent list. Thunder Dragons, I'm actually going to put quite high in tier 2. So look, Thunder Dragons is a good strategy just because they have Colossus back and they can make Colossus off one card. So just having that alone, in my opinion, makes Thunder Dragons worth at least giving it a try in Master Duel. Now, you only have one, but recycling cards from your Banished Zone and your graveyard is what Thunder Dragons do. So it is going to be sticking to the board a lot. And if you get that one Colossus on the board, your opponent hasn't got much of a good chance. Now, this is a strategy that is going to be a little bit expensive depending on the Thunder Dragon variant you're doing. So if you're doing like Chaos Thunder, yeah, it's quite expensive. If you're doing regular Thunder, it's a little bit cheaper. So if like regular Control Thunder, yeah, a little bit cheaper. But yeah, in general, I think Thunder Dragon is going to be a good strategy. Having Colossus back is always going to be awesome. Inferno is, unfortunately, I'm going to put in tier 3. And the reason for that is not because Inferno is necessarily a terrible deck. I just don't think it stands up to par to any of the good decks. When you look at the decks in kind of tier 1 and tier 2, none of these decks are going to be completely stunned by Inferno. Inferno can't usually keep up their resource game without abusing really expensive staples. And so, because of that, I just don't think it's worth taking. Now, Inferno does have the advantage of being able to tribute over things like Ignister. It does have the advantage of being able to kind of play through Maxi a little bit. But even with that, I just don't think it's worth it. If you come up against an Eldlich player as an Inferno player, well, you know what's going to happen most of the time? They're going to flip Tikaboo. You can't play the game anymore. If you come against Sky Striker, they're going to be shark cannoning all the cards in your graveyard. If you come up against Zoodiac, you're going to be hitting Solemns and stuff. You're going to try and tribute monsters and they've got flipping Drytron on the field. So as a result, I just think its lack of being able to compete with the resource game of the top decks just makes it not worth playing. Even if you cheese people in lower elos, none of that's going to happen in the higher elos. Unchained, I'm also going to put in tier 3. I don't think Unchained is a bad deck. However, I do think Unchained really does get to another level when DP is in the game. And not having DP in the game means that the game is less destruction focused than usual. And so as such, that's why I think Unchained is going to be tier 3. I don't think it's a bad deck. I think you can probably do a little bit. I think I saw a guy on the Unchained Duelist Facebook page who got to platinum with it. So I don't think it's a bad deck at all. But I just do think there are better choices. So Tri-Brigade Lyrilusk, this is going to be, not Tri-Brigade Lyrilusk, right? This is going to be Pure Lyrilusk. Pure Lyrilusk I'm going to put at the bottom of tier 2. I don't think it's bad or anything. However, I do think there are better options if you're going to be doing a go second strategy, because it simply just becomes Zeus Turbo, and there are better things to do than Zeus Turbo if you really want to win in the higher elos. That needs to be a secondary strategy in addition to what you're normally doing. Ogdoadic is not worth trying. It's just stupidly expensive for no reason. You have to buy a bunch of cards. Snake Rain, or not Snake Rain, sorry, Ogdoadic Water Lily for some reason is ridiculously expensive. It's an ultra rare. In fact, let me even check. Snake Rain is also an ultra rare. Snake Rain's also an ultra rare, and you're not using it in any other decks. And so as a result, Ogdoadic, I just don't think it's worth spending your gems on, at least not for your first deck. PK, Burning Abyss, yeah, they're going to be about the same place. So yeah, both PK, like I said, is there are better combo strategies than it, and it is going to dominate in lower elos. And the higher elos, it's not going to be as good, but I still think it's okay to play. I think I'll actually put Thunder Dragon above it, and I think BA variants like Trap BA are actually going to be slightly better than PK, at least when you get to higher elos. This is another. I don't know why I've got a secondary last picture. That's probably to do with my meta tier list, but whatever. Paleozoic is not terrible, however, it is going to go into tier 3, kind of close to the bottom, just because there are better things to do with Paleozoic right now. I mean, yeah, you've only got one Totally, which really sucks, which means you're not going to be doing any double Totally shenanigans. And then if you want to play a trap strategy, play Eldlich. Eldlich is just way better at setting 5 and bossing. Sharks, unfortunately, is not worth even trying, because again, only one Totally really does hurt the deck. Sharks is already kind of in the mid-range, teetering on strong in sort of regular TCG, but a big part of that is being able to do that double totally F-Zero board turn 1. Not being able to do that really just makes the deck not worth playing, in my opinion. Dragon Control is not an effective enough strategy. You're basically playing Zombie Control, which is also not a particularly consistent strategy. So as such, I'm definitely going to say that Sharks needs to be in the not worth trying strategy until perhaps we get another Toad, somewhere playing another Toad. Fluffals, I'm going to put the bottom tier 2. Fluffals is really, really good blind second. They can OTK through almost anything. Another great thing about Fluffals is that they're a deck that can usually take the Mech C challenge very, very well. And this is because they can almost always put up Appaloosa or Toad. If they've got a playable hand, essentially, they can put up Appaloosa or Toad before their 4th negate and then kill you. Before their 4th summon and then kill you. And so Maxi Challenge, they can play it very, very effectively. They can also kill you in very few summons as well if they really need to. Their whales do get up to stupid amounts of attacks. And so the combination of this means that if you're blinding second with Fluffals, you will steal a lot of wins. When you get to the higher elos, you will struggle a bit. But in the lower elos, for sure, Fluffals is going to be a really, really good deck to pick up. So yeah, guys, this is my Master tier list. So it's really weird looking at this because it looks so different to the regular tier list that I do in for Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. But yeah, guys, these are going to be the decks that you want to pick. So like I said, tier 1 decks are going to be the best value for your money at the moment. Tier 2, and as you can see, there are quite a lot of decks that you can kind of take into tier 2 and do okay with, but you do kind of want to stay at the top end of tier 2. Everything below tier 2, in my opinion, it's just not really worth buying at the moment. It might change in the future, but for now, I personally wouldn't build any of these decks. But yeah, guys, thank you all for watching. I will talk to you all soon. Peace.